The deep freeze has set in here in DC, but relations between Washington and Moscow are certainly thawing today. The first official contact between Putin and Washington since the Ukraine war started. Western diplomatic isolation of Russia then seemingly crumbling in that 1 hour plus phone call. Well, Trump posted about this phone call before he told Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine about it. He then spoke to Zelensky afterwards. On Truth Social, he called the phone call with Putin, quote, lengthy and highly productive. He said, President Putin even used my very strong campaign motto of common sense. Perhaps there a slight insight into the tactics being used by Vladimir Putin to try to woo Donald Trump in all of this. He said, we agreed to work together very closely, including visiting each other's nations. Well, in a press meeting in the Oval Office later, he then said that that first meeting would likely be in Saudi Arabia with Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia and Vladimir Putin before any other meeting between Putin, Zelensky and Trump would take place. Trump also later saying that the negotiations would be starting immediately. And I think, to be honest, the part that's not getting most attention, but I think is actually the most telling part of what Donald Trump said today, was when he was asked, do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process? And he paused to think about his answer before saying that that's an interesting question. That is a world away from what we would have heard from Joe Biden and even the Europeans who say that there has to be a European presence at these talks because any future security agreement of Ukraine should include Europe as well. So a massive departure there from the United States. Trump also said that he intended to continue sending financial support to Ukraine, and that he wanted it to be, quote, secured. He's mentioned these rare earth elements, things that the United States needs and Ukraine has an abundance of. He also said if we didn't do that, i.e. didn't continue the aid, that Putin would say he'd won. That's therefore then the clearest signal yet that he recognises that the aid could be a leverage in acquiring a deal for peace here in Ukraine. So a very telling day, and when we're looking at Donald Trump's hand, but how it's going to lay out with all the cards specifically is what we're still waiting to find out.
And Trump's Defence Minister, Pete Hegseth, was also in Brussels, where he told his NATO counterparts that it's unrealistic for Ukraine to get back all the territory it's lost since 2014. Was this in any way unexpected?
Not really. We've expected to hear from Donald Trump over the course of the last couple of months, and his rhetoric has been that there needs to be some kind of concession. So we have expected that Donald Trump would say that Ukraine needed to give up some form of land to be able to reach a peace deal. Well, the Ukrainians seem to have kind of preempted this. In a Guardian interview that came out just a couple of days ago, Zelensky said that the Ukrainians would be willing to trade a land with the Russians as they sue for peace, but the land they were talking about was the Kursk region, which of course is that part of Russia that the Ukrainians have taken over in recent months. Well, Pete Hegseth then, somewhat shocking as again compared to what we've heard from the Biden administration over the course of the last 3 years, saying that Kyiv's goals to regain all its territory that's been taken since 2014 when Crimea was of course annexed. He called it an unrealistic objective, and he also said the same thing about NATO membership. He said the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. That, of course, has been one of the key pillars that Ukraine has been pushing for. Instead, Pete Hegseth saying that the US is focusing more on China and really saying that Europe needs to take the lead on Ukraine, and it's more of a European problem that the US doesn't really want to have to think about. That also then backed up by Trump later on in the day, with Trump saying that that Ukraine likely won't get all the territory that it's taken, it won't get it back, and that also he doesn't think that NATO membership is, quote, practical.